Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Hello, brethren. Welcome to the latest episode of the Fort Worth Masonic podcast. I am Gabriel Yagish, and I am Worshipful Master of Fort Worth Lodge.
I am Billy Hamilton. I am past master and current Tyler of Fort Worth 148 Lodge.
Jeremy Gwynn, I am the junior warden for Fort Worth Lodge.
I'm Evie Kirkendall. I am the senior deacon for Fort Worth 148.
Brady Patton, current secretary for Fort Worth 148.
So it's a pleasure to have the listeners with us again. This is going to be one of our Quarryman's Roundtable episodes where we discuss discussion questions and just toss them around the table and see what our answers are. Most of these are sourced from reddit.com/r/Freemasonry, and I consider them fair game. Some of them will be from Facebook. Some of them will be from personal interactions we've had with folks, whether they be Masons or non-Masons. And so we'll kick it off with a question about the entered apprentice degree. This was posted by VVV Porcupine, and it is, just had my first degree with another brother at AF and AM of Camanillo, number 19 here in Washington. It's truly the greatest honor of my life to be a brother Mason, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm curious about reading material or biblical passages that have been significant on your Masonic journey relating to the degree, so relating to the entered apprentice degree. Obviously, Psalms 133, behold how good and pleasant it is kind of our starter, but what are some maybe readings or reading material or biblical passages that you guys find that is useful, relevant, and beneficial for entered apprentice Masons to be reading, I guess scripturally? What do you guys think?
Book of Ruth, pretty relevant, at least in Texas.
Yeah, Book of Ruth, right? That's a good start. I think anything that's about like brotherhood or initiation, I know that may be like extra biblical, but something that kind of emphasizes the point of becoming part of a larger fraternity, as well as I guess the mandatory little handouts that Grand Lodge provides to the entered apprentice Mason.
I also think the anointing of Aaron is probably pretty relevant, at least in the Texas version of
That's
stuff.
right. That's right.
That whole like how it's in. All right, this is the biblical scholar is failing me right now. Isn't that in?
Wouldn't that be in Deuteronomy?
Deuteronomy, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
Deuteronomy, and then
it's not. I don't think it's in Exodus. I think it has to be in Deuteronomy.
yeah. Because
Comment down below, all you biblical scholars out there who have a Bible in front of you. Tell us where that is, because I believe it's in Deuteronomy.
Yeah, because that's after they're out of the wilderness, right? So
Yes, that's whenever Moses has been set aside and they're having to get more priests, because Aaron is the next in line.
that's right.
Or would that have been Samuel? Oh my gosh, now I feel like an idiot. I'm
Evie,
glad my Old Testament teacher isn't in listening to this podcast.
for our listeners, Evie, what are you currently majoring in?
I am in seminary. And I can't even tell you where Aaron's anointing is. I'm failing the God test.
So
Actually, though, the book of Exodus, though, because doesn't that talk about the tabernacle in the wilderness, which is actually part of the catechism?
right, that's
Absolutely.
the book of Exodus would be great to read about, but just on the sheer description of, hey, this is the setup they had before the temple.
And
Right.
I mean, think about it, they're traveling from the west to the east.
Hey. From the west west to the east. That's right, because they're leaving Egypt.
And they're
right?
going to the promised lands,
They're going to the promised lands.
even though they take a slight detour, so.
Yeah, no kidding. What is it like if you pull it up on Google Maps? The journey walking is only like 7 days or something like that.
Right.
They got lost for 40 years.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, y'all need MapQuest or something.
Even though I do have to say, being there, I would not want to walk it.
Yeah, no, probably not.
2 or 3 days in, I'd be dead.
It'd just be like water.
Well, that's why they had manna from heaven.
Yeah.
So I think that like the Book of Exodus for the narrative for the narrative of the tabernacle in the wilderness, and Deuteronomy for the anointing of Aaron, right? And that's what that Bible passage describes, right? That you hear during the entered apprentice degree. You know, the oil that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard that went down to the skirts of his garments. That's what they did with high priests when they anointed him. So, I guess that would be something to look into as well. So lots of Old Testament stuff, right? And I'm wondering, maybe some of the stuff from Matthew. If you're looking into the first shall be last and the last shall be first, there's some really cool stuff about the idea of the entered apprentice being the newest member of the lodge, and the comparison with the cornerstone. But if you think about it, as the newest entered apprentice, he's the last member of the lodge, or the newest member of the lodge, and a cornerstone would be the first stone of the building. So there's a illusion there. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. So the book of Matthew, and the story of everybody being paid 1 penny would probably be very worthwhile to look into as well.
And if you wanted to get into the New Testament stories, I think the parable of the vineyard, where the vineyard owner hires workers throughout the day, that would be a very relevant parable for entered apprentices.
Yeah, and then all the Brother Mark masters listening to this are going, I know about this. So let's see. And I guess Genesis too, right? Like, or not Genesis, comma 2 TOO. Yeah, Genesis also, because that's one of the most fundamental Bible passages you're gonna hear in any Masonic degree.
And I think that if you really meditate, we've had conversations like this before and after Lodge about the opening 3 verses in Genesis, how profound and important they are in understanding, what is going on, and how that shapes your understanding theologically, but also the spiritual journey that you're going to be on in Masonry. I think it's those first 3 verses of the Bible are probably foundational, so I would definitely recommend a meditation on that.
Yep. And then also, I guess the parallel to the Old Testament Genesis, John book 1 verses 1 through 5, right, which is the basically him retelling the first few passages of Genesis, but with an emphasis on from a Christian perspective, Christ, and then from a broader, more ecumenical perspective, light or enlightenment and whatnot. So I don't know. I think we've seen some good resources here. So go read all of those things. Here's a good question, and it's a tough one, right? This is submitted by @alas657, and it's titled "Whispering Good Counsel?" I am extremely new in my journey, raised just a few short months ago. I am an active member of my lodge and loving every aspect of it thus far. I did have some red flags come up the other evening, and am unsure of how to handle it. We have a brother that recently turned in a categorical lecture. He did a pretty good job, but his mannerisms concerned me. Having been through a great deal of vocational training on the subject, I recognized what would be considered indicators of methamphetamine usage. If I had witnessed the same behavior and motor skill coordination in my usual vocation, it would have easily called for reasonable suspicion testing. We all have our vices that we are constantly shedding and fighting, but this is a concern that I feel needs addressed. To add to the problem, we are a very small lodge, and the brother's father is one of the, quote, old-timers in lodge. How would you handle this situation? I am worried for the brother's well-being as much as the image and harmony of the lodge. I don't feel as though I can turn a blind eye, but also don't want to overstep as a newly raised brother. Like I said, tough question.
I think at first, it would be prudent to observe patterns. If this was a one-time thing, maybe the guy had a medical condition.
Could be.
If he, of course, we don't know the person writing this, and we don't know how familiar they are. So they admitted being a newly raised Master Mason. They may not have had a whole lot of experience with this guy. This guy may have, a tick, a physical condition, where that causes ticks or whatever.
I think it's also a good point to err on to suggest that that's a possibility. But I also think it's a possibility this guy doesn't talk about what his regular vocation is, and it seems like he's pretty well versed in what the telltale signs of methamphetamine use are, which are I think it goes a little bit more than just a little hopped up on coffee today.
Yeah, because the phrasing he uses is, quote, having been through a great deal of vocational training on the subject, I recognized, ...
Right.
I wonder if he's in law enforcement. That's kind of what that, especially when it says, there's a part, what does he say, testing, probable cause.
He
testing.
says, if I had witnessed the same behavior and motor skill coordination in my usual vocation, it would have easily called for reasonable suspicion testing.
Right.
That sounds like he's maybe law enforcement.
That's kind of what I wanted, which is, okay, great. I'm glad our officers are trained for that. Assuming that the posters, let's just entertain for a moment, he is a law enforcement. So yeah, that's great that they're trained on that, and definitely keep an eye on the guy. But if he's got a medical condition, like I believe Tourette's, they can develop a physical tick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've seen people on meth before. I've been to the rough side of town and whatnot, and it's pretty unique.
It cycles up and down. They're totally normal for a week, and then 2 weeks later you don't see them, and they're back, and they're skinny, and they're really shaky. It's tragic. So it's pretty obvious if they're on.
Yeah, it's
drug.
yeah. I really, just listening to this, I'm willing to bet that it might be what he suspects. So go back to that question: how do you handle it?
Yeah, assuming that it is what he thinks it is. You look like you have something on your mind, Billy.
Well, no, so, my first thought is, really the only thing you can do is talk to the brother, but if he's in law enforcement, there may be a reluctance there. But you run a danger of, you can't accuse the guy without cause, because then you're introducing the name of a Brother Master Mason, you subject yourself to possible Masonic charges.
Right.
So it's a dangerous slope to assume, and even worse to act upon it. You have to err on the side of, I guess, caution when it comes down to it. Unless the person gets busted, or admits to it, there's really not much you can do other than.
Well,
can't you at least just talk to him? Hey man, are you okay?
Yeah. I would say maybe something like, hey man, when you were turning in, he calls it a categorical lecture, but proficiency, right? Hey man, when you were turning in your categorical lecture or proficiency last week, you seemed like you were really off. You doing okay, dude? I feel like that's a good way to kind of, cast the net without, one, freaking him out too much, and then two, without accusing him of anything. Because it could have been that,
right.
Hey, maybe he has some sort of condition and he had a really bad spell, and maybe he does need some sort of help in that, he needs to be more regular about taking his meds or whatever, Or it just may be that he's doing a crap load of meth before lodge. I don't know.
Well, so, I mean, yeah, it definitely needs to be addressed. I mean, but, yeah, you have to be very general about it. And maybe the best solution here, especially if the poster is in law enforcement, is, you know, if his father is an old member of the lodge, just
Maybe
say,
talk to
hey,
his dad, yeah.
you know, I saw, you know, young whoever, you know, is he doing all right? You know, but even then, you still have to keep it general.
Yeah, you can't walk up to the guy and say, hey man, is your kid on meth? You can't do that.
I mean, you could.
I mean,
should
you
you?
could.
No.
No. I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. But Billy's absolutely right though, because phrasing it that way, you very likely can open yourself up to Masonic charges. So, but what you could do is go to the old timer and be like, hey, I noticed your son was a little twitchy that night. Is he okay? Is there something I can help him with? Does he need something or
No, I wouldn't go with twitchy, but I would say, hey, he seemed like he was really off, or he seemed like he wasn't
Your
feeling
boy
well.
seems like he's a tweaker.
Well, you
Your
can
boy
also-
looks like he gotten into that crystal methamphetamine.
What's his rate? Because I
you're-
lost my supplier.
If you're not confrontational, take it up with the worshipful master.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the other officers,
Oh, wait.
that's what they're there for.
Ain't that his job?
Well, he should,
Slightly.
but I mean, you don't read everybody the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
So,
The worshipful master's job is to be the directed will of the lodge. And I would assume that the directed will of the lodge would naturally be to take care of a brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely, and that'd be my first
But
concern. Let's help the guy.
let's also consider, let's assume just for the sake of argument for this discussion question, that the brother is in fact on meth.
That's my
What
default
are-
assumption here. I'm assuming that the original poster is accurate.
So we've all talked about the problems that are going to be raised by just talking to somebody about this. We can't. It's going to be really hard to go to the person who's involved, the brother who's hypothetically on meth, because, I mean, what are you going to do? Hey, brother, are you having problems? Yes, I'm tweaking out on meth. Can't you tell? That's not going to be the answer you're going to get. If the father knows his son has a meth problem, then he's probably going to circle the wagons around his son, unless there is a really long and protracted history of this person, which the lodge would probably already be aware of.
Yeah.
So chances are this is going to be one of those situations where the two people who have the most information about it are probably not going to be forthcoming about it, and they're not going to be, talkative about it. So the question then becomes, if this person is on meth, what is the lodge's responsibility to this brother, knowing that A, we want this person's welfare being taken care of, because that is first and foremost, I think, on all of our minds. But then the second thing that I think we have to consider is this person, do we want Freemasonry associated with someone who is on drugs of that nature? And then that becomes a really big issue. That's where I think the conflict arises.
I wanna amend or change your question a little bit. So versus what is the lodge's responsibility versus what is a brother's responsibility? Because aren't we all supposed to hold each other up and help each other?
I would
Absolutely.
say, and bringing that distinction up, I would say that brothers have an inherent requirement of taking care of each other. I would say that the lodge itself, as an organizational entity, does not have any responsibility of acting in a specific way other than coordinating brothers in caring for this guy. But
When I say lodge, also, I think I should clarify too that I don't mean the organizational structure of the
Yeah,
lodge.
but you're
or
talking
Masonry.
about the lodge
I'm
as
talking
a
about the lodge
collection.
as a congregation of brothers.
Yeah.
And what does that communion of brothers? What are all of our brotherly responsibilities? And that includes us. If this person is a brother, he's a brother to us as well.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say it's very important, right? Because we say, hey, do we want this guy associated with the lodge, right? Well, that's a good question to ask, but it's also important to remember that as Masons, while we support, civil, everything that helps make civil society be civil society, we are also not cops, right? It is our job. And actually, we don't necessarily even have the ability or desire to do this, right? To go report on somebody or something, but within the bounds of our laws, you know, if he goes and he gets arrested for possession of methamphetamine or intention to distribute, then yeah, we can say, hey, this guy has committed a crime, we don't feel he's worthy of being a Mason, and let's suspend him or expel him via trial or whatever. But until he's committed a crime, we really don't have any responsibility in terms of like, or not responsibility, we don't have an ability to say, hey, we don't want him to be a member anymore.
Well, we do have the ability to hold up his progression, because if he's turning in I assume that we're saying a categorical lecture is the same thing.
Yeah, his use of the words categorical lecture,
I would
reading
assume that that's
him,
proficiency. That means
yeah,
that
he's
he
turning
hasn't
in
been
proficiency.
raised, but that means that any Master Mason, at least in our jurisdiction, could recommend that his progression be halted.
He might have already been raised, he might just be turning in the master's proficiency.
And that's also a possibility. We're a little light on evidence, or, you know,
Information,
information here. But if this person hasn't been raised, then we do have the ability as a lodge or
To say-
as an individual to say, I'm opposing this person's progression until we get clarity on
Yeah.
some issue.
Yeah, but at least in our jurisdiction, we have.
Yes, at least in our jurisdiction.
We have a mechanism for that.
Well, I guess in what if we did a hypothetical here, what if it wasn't methamphetamine? What if it was something that was more socially acceptable, like a brother who was suspected of being an alcoholic, right? I mean, would that change our response any? Because I feel like we should approach it in the same manner, right? With the same level of concern for the brother.
Yeah.
You know, without that, and so I guess that would be how I'd address it. How would you treat it if you had a brother that you felt drank too much? You know, he came to lodge with alcohol in his breath. You know, you can't accuse him of it, but it's a little less of a, oh, I got to do something than, you know, methamphetamine. But I think it should be the same kind of response that you would give. So,
I agree with that position, because I mean, I think as brothers, we're supposed to hold each other up and hold each other accountable. So yeah, so let's run with that idea for a minute. What if we did have a functioning alcoholic, and you know, if they're functioning and they're not, you know, missing, like let's say they're still paying their rent and they're still, you know, paying their child support or whatever, you know, and all their needs are being, you know, met, but yet they drink excessively. You know, okay, that's one thing, but if they're starting to get sloppy, then like, hey, brother, are you losing control? Is this getting the better of you? We can help you. Lord, how can I help you?
Yeah.
I think though the difference though is that one substance is inherently legal and one substance is inherently illegal.
Right.
And that very well could be a distinction without a difference in terms of what our response should be.
Right.
But I think that the concern is that
I think there's an additional component there
Exactly.
of not only is this bad for this guy's body, for his well-being, emotional and spiritual well-being, but this is also an illegal thing, right? And I think that's where you start to step it up, right? Like on top of everything that's bad about addiction to any substance, this is also illegal.
but in all fairness, it's suspicion of an illegal thing, not evidence.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I've also never seen an alcoholic steal my car and trade it for drugs.
But there's no indication that this brother did it. He just acted weird
Yeah.
when he was given a categorical lecture.
True.
Categorical lecture.
But if he's a tweaker, I'll tell you what, I'm on high guard.
Well,
Because,
Guard your jewels.
yeah, well, lodge furniture, you know, the emblems of the lodge. I mean, because
If
yeah,
you
I
don't give
mean,
a
if
debit
there's,
card.
I mean, seriously, and there are, I mean, okay, I can't speak for every lodge, but let's just say Fort Worth Lodge. We have some items in the lodge that, okay, if they turn up missing, it's going to cost us some money to replace.
And there's
And-
some stuff that is literally irreplaceable.
Right, yeah, because we have some very old items in our lodge.
Our concern for the welfare of the brother is the same, but you need to be a lot more precautionary with one than the other.
Mhm.
Because one, you can't really fix either one. You can help them the best you can, but one of them is more likely to
Yeah.
take things and spiral downward faster.
well, but you have to be careful in how you address it, because then again, if you treat him highly suspiciously compared to other brothers, you know, then that can lead to issues right there too. And
Sure.
as worshipful master, your primary concern is peace and harmony in the lodge.
Yeah. And
It's a
so-
sticky wicket, man.
It is. So I think kind of we could probably agree on the progression of events being talk to this guy first, ask him if he's okay, then maybe talk to his dad and ask him if he's okay, and then if things still seem really out of whack, talk to the master, I would say, right?
Express your concerns to the master and let the master handle it.
Yeah.
Or how in whatever, because I know some lodges, they prefer you talk to one of the wardens about, lodge stuff.
Chaplain too. if you have a
Chaplain would be a good one. Hey,
Yeah,
that's good. Especially our
chaplain
chaplain.
would be a great one.
Especially
Yeah.
our chaplain, he's wonderful.
I think there's a particular sentence, before we move on from this one, there's a particular sentence that I feel kind of strongly about, actually, right? It's the last sentence. It says, I don't feel as though I can turn a blind eye, but also don't want to overstep as a newly raised brother. And regardless of all the other discussion that we've had, which is all valid and important, right? That specific sentence, I don't want to overstep as a newly raised brother, my response to that is, everyone has stop work authority, right? Like, that's a, I don't know how many industries you hear that slogan, right? But everyone has stop work authority. When I was working in the oil field, that was something that they drilled into our head. It doesn't matter if you're an intern out there, with a, clipboard and a too clean hard hat, or you're the roughneck who's been out there for 30 years and is missing a couple fingertips. Everyone has stop work authority. You see something weird, you don't have, there's nobody that doesn't have a right to say, hey, this doesn't seem right.
Well,
Even the janitor.
correct, in an appropriate way, and I think this brother's display of caution is appropriate, and if someone came to me with this issue, I would say, you need to talk to your mentor in the lodge, or worshipful master, or chaplain is actually one I wouldn't have considered, but yeah, that's a great idea there.
Your chaplain is, in most lodges, your chaplain is usually going to be like one of your most tenured past masters, so he would have a lot of knowledge of the lodge and who's in it and stuff.
Yeah, I would advise against approaching the brother that he suspects may be under the influence of drugs, just unless it's a very general, are you doing okay?
Yeah, you doing all right.
Yeah.
Not like, hey, bro, you railing some stuff back there.
Yeah.
Also, odds are pretty
Sharing
good someone else
caring.
has noticed it.
What?
Someone else has probably noticed it too.
Probably, right? Like, he can't be the only one that goes, man, that seems kind of weird.
Yeah, but you can't shop that around and say, hey.
Because then you get into defamation, right?
Yeah.
Hey, does so-and-so look like a tweaker to you? 'Cause,
Does so-and-so look like a tweaker to you? Yeah, you heard it here.
I want that on a t-shirt.
That'd be a good t-shirt.
Have you noticed young brother Jesse is acting a little
Does
weird?
Jeremy look like a tweaker to you?
At my weight, no.
No, I was going to say he's a little too pudgy for that. Oh, man. So let's talk about this question here. This was posted by Imperfect Ashlar, and the title is Wisdom for My Journey East. I have a year before I head to the east, God willing and should tradition prevail, but I'm a planner. My lodge is beginning a huge uphill momentum swing, and I want to do everything I can to continue to take our lodge to the next level. So, tell me the following about your year in the East, or what you've seen from the leaders in your lodge. 1, the best initiative you started. 2, the thing you would not do again. And 3, the best advice you received. Many sincere thanks in advance. Chats are welcome for anything you don't feel comfortable posting. So I guess, we're kind of split here in terms of guys who are or have been in the East and guys who have opportunity to observe guys in the East. But let's take it one by one. What's the best initiative that you've seen a leader in a lodge start, or the best initiative, and for Billy, because he is a past master, the best initiative that he started?
Oh my God, yeah. Well, COVID kind of.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I had plans.
You had plans.
Yeah.
Your budget was perfect.
Yeah, I did come in under budget. Yeah, that was one thing I can say.
By at least a couple bucks.
Yeah, by a few, But yeah, no, COVID killed it. I would say honestly though, I had some guys who did well before me, right? I mean, So really, it's one, don't try, if you have upward momentum already, don't do something that will shake that. And number two, make sure that you get others on board. You shouldn't have to feel like you do everything yourself. That's the whole that's the whole purpose of committees, really. Get people that you trust, people that are there, because too easily we assign people to committees who, never show up, and so you should assume that nothing's gonna happen. So yeah, I can't think of anything we did new my year, because everything was
COVID,
killed,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I had ideas that, I wanted to have, we had started before the fellowship, and I had a couple of ideas I even had reservations for like raw brewing.
Oh, yeah,
I was
that's
thinking
right.
that would be a good officer, like planning, and then COVID shut it all
Wearing
down.
their shirt.
Yeah.
What was the best advice you received?
The best advice I received was, I guess, Ruth and Billy Moore were just tons of good advice. And really, it's like, don't feel you have to do everything yourself. And I guess that goes into the committees, right? So that's what I would say. This guy sounds like he's he's got a fire lit under him, and that's fantastic. But the best thing you can do is really get other people involved and let them have authority to make decisions. It's too easy to be too controlling, to be too domineering, and unfortunately, sometimes when you take that approach, there's a huge backlash against it.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way to kill momentum, is to try and keep things under your control.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to let go.
Yeah. And then I guess I'll go next, just because I'm currently in these, and then we can go to things that you guys have seen, right? I think best initiative I started, I don't know that I can say or call a judgment call on that yet, because I'm still pretty early on in my year as master. Although I would say that there's a lot of excitement from the coin. We're working on a lodge coin, and a lot of guys seem to be really excited about it, which we're really happy about. And then we have gotten really good about having a social hour after lodge. And that's something that I've been trying to encourage as much as possible. It's something that happened organically, but it's something that I've been trying to lean into as master, of like, hey guys, yeah, like we're all gonna go somewhere, like we're rarely not gonna have a social hour after lodge is closed, right? And it's something that I've been trying to keep, pounding on as master, like, yeah, this is a good thing, because it's awesome. Even, it's something that guys find very valuable, and as master I find it very useful, because it's a wonderful opportunity, because I have so many of my officers there to start hashing things out of like, all right, who's going to handle this, who's going to handle that, it's like a subcommittee meeting. Thing I would not do again, there's one thing that I can think of from this year, so from serving as master. We're working on our mission, vision, values statement, and our declaration of principles. And I forgot to invite one of the original drafters of our values, vision, and mission statements and declarations of principles to be part of that committee. And I feel like that was a big screw up on my part, not just because it's the polite thing to do, but also because he has a massive amount of insight. And his opinion is legitimately incredibly valuable to me, and I just didn't think about it. And so I think one of the things that my takeaway from that experience was really, make sure you've got everybody on your committee that you want for a project, and make sure that people actively know that they can be on this committee or have an ability to express interest on it. Because you might end up with somebody that you could have really used their input and you didn't think about it. So that's my takeaway from that one. From the year that I served in the East at Texas Chapter and Texas Council, I would definitely echo what Billy said, don't try to do everything yourself. I took on a huge workload for myself when I was presiding in the York Rite, and I didn't have to do that, and I would have survived way better if I delegated more. But I was also brand new to the East, and that was my learning curve there. Best advice I received was definitely kind of twofold. One is praise heavily, often, and publicly, right? If you've got an officer that did a good job at something, praise him. Don't just like praise him for the sake of praising him, right? Like, be genuine in the praise that you give members of your lodge and officers that are doing a good job. You have to genuinely feel the sentiments you're expressing, but also make sure to express them. Don't just be like, oh yeah, great job, man, like that's it, and then just leave it lying there. Like, praise them publicly in front of the lodge, and be good about it, because you want to encourage guys to know, hey, we're gonna recognize that this was great work, we should all be happy with this, and and I as master am particularly thankful, right? So that's a big one. And then the other one is something that I say all the time that I picked up from another brother is, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Because while there are many aspects, this is still a mystical institution with very wise esoteric truths, and there's a lot of incredible, valuable spiritual development to be done in this organization. But if it's not worth your time and you are not enjoying yourself, something is wrong. And so if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. That's not necessarily a character judgment, it's a indication that something somewhere needs to change. So I would say, for you guys that haven't been in the East yet, what would you say that you've seen in the East that you liked, that you wouldn't do based off of your observations?
Well, Gabe, I want to give you some feedback. So for our listeners, and I want to share a story that's happened actually last week. So we had a death in our Masonic family, very unexpected, and it was after the lodge fellowship meeting that Gabe decided to send flowers and food to the family. And one of our stewards was there, and he's a new Master Mason and very excited. He's very, very wanting to help and everything, and so he was on the ball. That next day we got everything ordered, and Gabe sent me a text saying, hey, make sure you tell him good job. So I actually took a screenshot of that and forwarded that picture to him, and he was very grateful.
Yeah.
And that just kind of that positive reassurance. So that's something that I've seen masters do that is great, because especially newly minted Master Masons love positive feedback. Everybody loves positive feedback.
Everyone loves positive feedback.
So that's something great I've seen you do.
I would say, in terms of what I have seen that I would like to see change, is I feel like sometimes, and in some lodges, and over the course of some years, and there's a lack of continuity between the person in the East, the person in the West, and the person in the South.
Oh yeah.
And those three people, it almost seems like that every year somebody comes into the East, every once in a while, and they have a solo agenda. That they look like, it seems like that their year in the East is in a vacuum. And that can't be the case. And I think that that's the place where a lot of lodges and a lot of lines of leadership get really fouled up. Because there has to be, you sitting in the East has to connect to Jeremy, who's junior warden.
Yeah.
Those two, your years have to connect in some way. And
Yeah.
you have to have a sense of continuity with what Jeremy's plans are. I mean, he should be thinking about obviously what he's going to be doing when he gets to the East, and he should be communicating those things with his senior warden and his master of the lodge right now, and that should be a continuous conversation, so that when he gets in the East, there is continuity between what you've been doing this year and what he's going to be doing and inheriting his year.
Yeah.
I think that is something that a lot of lodges don't always consider. And that's not to say that Fort Worth 148 has been
But we have experienced that. right? Like
I think every lodge will have experienced that at some
something
point.
that Billy brought up was if you have really strong momentum, you know, the phrase the brother uses here is uphill momentum, but you know, momentum of any kind, right? If you have really strong momentum, don't try, you know, don't rock the boat, but don't screw it up, right? Like,
Well, and I think that goes to having a very clear sense of where that momentum is coming from.
Yeah.
And in most cases, in my view, it certainly can't hurt, but I would say that it is probably because several people in line have had a very clear vision, have a very clear shared vision, and are all guiding the lodge in a very similar trajectory that is successful. And so I would just say to this person, be aware of what got you the momentum that you have, either positive or negative, and run with it in an appropriate way. Don't be the person that gets in the way. I would say positively, one of the things that I have seen that is very powerful for masters of a lodge, and I've seen it in our lodge, is a very strong sense of vision of the big picture. That there is a big picture in Masonry that needs to be seen of a lodge's organization and how it works and what is drawing people in and is what is pushing people away. And the master of the lodge, while they definitely, every master has their own agenda and wants to enact certain protocols and programs and things of that nature. I think that they also have to have the humility to step back and see outside of their personal agenda and see the big picture of how the lodge is operating.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy to do, because they have to be willing to set aside. I mean, I think of Billy's year, it was completely wrecked by COVID. And I know that, you know, hearing Billy's conversations in that year, he had some really great things that we were going to be doing. And he had the wherewithal to step back and say, you know what, I can't force this agenda because of COVID. I'm going to do my best to do what I can to keep this lodge functioning, keep communication lines open, to have Zoom to get-togethers periodically that we all kind of enjoyed during the pandemic to stay connected. And that was a great example of somebody stepping back and seeing the big picture. Of course, that's a very easy big picture to see, but it's also very difficult, I think, for masters of the lodge to always see that. And this is, of course, coming from somebody who hasn't said in the East, so everything that I've just said, take with a giant grain of salt, because if I ever said the East, I'm probably going to be kicking myself in the butt for having said any of this, so.
No.
Actually,
Come in and chop the budget. We're not doing nothing.
We're not doing anything this year.
If anything, it's more valuable because you haven't sat in the East, and so you don't have that weird past mastery bias of like, well, damn it, it should be this year.
Well,
You know?
in being worshipful master, you're kind of insulated, right? It's like, I'm going, and I hope everyone's okay with it, because no one wants to come up to me and say, that sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of that, right? Because people are like, well, I don't want to, like, you know, kind of crap on his efforts, right? Because as master, you as a member of the lodge, you kind of want to encourage the master, be like, yeah, buddy, good job, you know? And
That was a great ritual you did the other night.
yeah, oh yes, you didn't screw up that lecture at all, you know.
Great efforts.
Yeah, A for effort.
You were really up there.
Well, I've noticed one thing though. If you do
You
start
definitely
criticizing,
presided.
sometimes you volunteer yourself to get to. Well, fine, you do it next time. Dang it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, this kind of stunk. You know, all right, fine, you're playing in the next one.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I'm so glad you just volunteered to make it better.
Just want to reiterate back on what you said about the experience with the previous past master and the budget. Pay attention to the stuff you're working on. If you have access to someone that was initially, definitely get them involved. Because what you don't want is to have to gavel down somebody in a meeting. That's gonna be horrible.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet. I kind of want to see it, but I definitely don't want to see it.
came pretty close this year.
Yeah, I mean, budget's touchy, obviously. Anything you change that's people worked on for hours and hours, they get upset about, and you
Yeah.
don't want that in the lodge.
No, it was definitely, for example, with the declaration of principles and mission, values, and vision. You know, one of the original authors of that document turned to me and he was like, "Well, I don't think this is a very good idea." and I don't like this. And my initial reaction was, oh man, I spent a lot of time on this. The guys spent a lot of time on this. You know, we sat down at the table and we all thought it was really good. And then, but also sitting there and realizing, man, like a lot of what he said had a huge amount of value to it, and having to forcibly detach my ego from the decision because it was a passion project, right? You know.
I don't want to see that brother gavel down ever.
Yeah, no.
Hey, we had the shiniest turd that we could muster. It was shiny, it was beautiful. Come to find out, it was just a shiny turd.
So with that though, I do have to say, especially with financial planning in the lodge, be transparent. Don't be afraid to tell your members why you're doing something. They may not agree with it, but give them the reasoning.
And that was something that we worked at really hard this year when we were rehashing the budget. I mean, I like to think that we did a really good job of saying, hey guys, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing this. If you see this, you know, we're withdrawing X amount here because of these financial constraints. This is how much we're spending over here on this. And it was a level of detail that we went into that with the general membership, I don't know that we've ever gone into that much detail, because I've been at trustees meetings of the lodge where, you know, when I was brand new junior warden and you were brand new secretary, you know, like, and in the trustees meetings, we poured into it, right? Like we really went in on, oh yeah, this is what the lodge is gonna, you know, spend, and this is what we're gonna do and stuff. And then when it came to actually like passing the budget in lodge and discussing it with the brethren, like there was no detail on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is the budget, vote on it, thanks, bye. You know, it's like, we can't do that. So, transparency, yes.
You can't even, but you have a lot of very upset brothers.
So
Yeah, which is what happened a couple years ago.
what's funny is I was looking at the meeting invite from right before I became master of the lodge, and trying to look, because it's like been in so many different planning meetings now. It's like, was that my idea or was that someone else's?
I know the feeling. You're like, is this something I came up with for this grand body or for my own lodge?
But looking at it, especially after my predecessor, the primary focus of the lodge was very much around our financial standing, right? And our lodge actually does, you know, we do pretty well. We're very solid, but it was a matter of preserving that, you know, that financial standing, you know, and being good stewards of the lodge's finances. And so looking at it, it's like the things I had on mine were contingency funds, right? The building fund, just in case something happened to the temple. And because COVID was just starting, I had proposed a brother-to-brother fund where we allocated some money to buy basic supplies for people, especially because, you know, like masks and toilet paper were running out. And, and I remember we bought like some supplies, and I remember sending out emails and saying, does anybody need everything or anything? And everyone's like, no, we're good. And so we just donated a little bit we gathered to the TMRC.
Yep.
And
Which, to be fair, that if it goes to the TMRC, it is a worthwhile use.
And for those listeners not knowing what TMRC is, that's the Texas Masonic Retirement Center.
Which is located in beautiful Arlington, Texas.
Yeah, and I personally, I actually made the nursing staff like the ear savers for the masks because they were wearing them like 12 hours a day.
Sarah really liked the ones that you made for her.
So, and then like the other one was, did we need to hire a financial planner? It's like, we have all this money, how do we, you know, invest appropriately?
The answer to that may still be, yeah, maybe.
How do we invest the $30 that we have? All right, $2. Let's see what they can do.
Yeah, that was everything, because I mean, we were doing well with membership at the time, you know. We had great programs in place, and it was really just a matter of how do we keep going forward and be good stewards of this legacy we have, this 165 years.
160 something year. So let's go ahead and tackle one more question for this episode. And it's not so much a question as it is a opportunity for us to discuss what we would maybe say to this guy, or, you know, what we could do. The title of the post is "Bye, Brothers," posted by Joey K. Hurst. I'm hanging it up, and soon will no longer be a brother. After a lot of debate, I've come to realize the hard fact that I will not be able to learn the catechisms to advance. My brain just doesn't work in that way. Never has. Something that's taken me over 10 years to talk myself into joining, gone in a matter of months. What do you say to this guy?
Horse feathers, you can learn it.
So
I will say even worse, that shame on whatever lodge is handling his catechism, because the purpose of a catechism, no one is I think I've heard several people say this, and I hesitate to give credit to any singular person because they're all going to be upset that I didn't give them credit for this, but the purpose of Masonry is not to memorize stuff.
Yeah.
If the moment you think that Freemasonry is about memorizing things and that's the gateway into your lodge, then your lodge is failing. Your lodge is failing on so many different levels, and I will say that unequivocally. I will say that to the faces of the brothers who make that the threshold by which any member has to walk through.
Bingo.
Memorizing stuff is not Masonry. Now, are there valuable lessons in the catechism? Absolutely, and I think that they need to be learned. But is there a way for us to get a brother who has a difficult time memorizing stuff? Maybe he just doesn't have a brain that memorizes information well. Maybe he's neurodivergent in some way with ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, any number of other learning disabilities or learning challenges that make it very difficult for someone to memorize it. Should a person like that, who would otherwise be a great brother, a passionate Mason, involved, active, all of those things, should that get in the way of it? And my answer is an emphatic no, and a shame on anyone who makes that the thing that prevents a brother or discourages a brother like this from being in the lodge.
Ooh.
I'm on a soapbox.
Easy
That makes
tiger.
me-
Easy tiger.
I'm fully with you.
It makes me. It actually makes my blood boil
Yeah.
whenever I hear stories like that, because this is someone who is passionate enough to think about this for
10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
And let's assume that he's being completely honest about that. He's been thinking about this for 10 years, wanting to do it for 10 years. He is passionate enough to where he got on a Reddit forum and threw this out there into the internet universe.
Which is
So-
kind of,
Like, this is
Yeah.
not the normal way of doing things. He's obviously, and it seems to me that this is a giant cry out into the void. Why is this happening?
yeah.
And that's what I'm hearing, is someone who's saying, why is this happening? Why is a catechism the stumbling block to me being an otherwise great Mason?
And that's kind of what, this is my big question, is what has him so sorely convinced, right? There's two possibilities here, right? One is he really should talk to the master. Maybe, the first possibility is it's all in his head and he's psyched himself out, and he should really talk to a mentor or the master of the lodge and say, hey, I have some real concerns about my ability to memorize this, and I don't think I can progress in being in Masonry or being a Mason because I don't think I can memorize this, right? Maybe it's all in his head, and maybe he's just psyched himself out and that's it. But then my other question is, this seems like a really strong conviction to jump to after 10 years of pursuing Masonic membership, gone in a matter of months, right? The darker possibility is that there's a member of his lodge who's telling him, you can't progress because you can't memorize this, or maybe, or worse, the officer corps or the master is saying, oh, well, you can't memorize this, too bad, right? And in that case, it's like, yeah, no, I want to find out where this guy's lodge is so I can take the master out into the parking lot, So I think number one is this guy's got to, the thing that we've got to figure out here is this in this guy's head? Is he psyching himself out unnecessarily? And then two, if not, this dude's lodge doesn't deserve him. I don't care what his ability is, but if your lodge wants to reject you because you can't memorize something, then they don't deserve you.
But haven't we heard this before? I mean, we've heard this concern before. And granted, yeah, especially for the EA, there's a lot to memorize. it's a fair chunk, but it's not insurmountable. I mean, look at how many thousands and thousands of members there are. So I mean, it is something that can happen, but I know it's daunting especially for initiates, right?
It
So-
kills me when somebody wants to wait to progress till they get word perfect.
Which is fine. Hey, everybody's got their own
I've
standards.
seen 99% perfect. I've never seen perfect.
Right.
You're not going to get there.
Right.
I've seen guys say, "Hey, let me hold back for about a month because I'm like 85% perfect, and I feel like I can really get to 100% in about a month." But I've also seen where guys hold off and say, "Hey, I'm still making a mistake on this one question, and I'm not ready." Hey, hold on, like,
Yeah.
you've been sitting here for like 4 months because you can't get 99.999% perfect. As long as you understand what the questions are asking and what the answers are, and you've got a pretty good grasp of the flow, I don't really care. Is it good? Is it desirable to turn in a perfect proficiency? Yes, that is a desirable thing. We want to know that guys have developed the capacity and ability to deliver ritual. That's a great thing. Is it necessary? No.
I kind of set my standards by the Inside Freemasonry on Netflix,
Uh-huh.
where they're doing the Entered Apprentice, and
Uh-huh.
he did no prep work whatsoever, and they're literally telling him the answers, and they still advanced him. This is Grand Lodge of England. That's how they did it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a minimum standard. But they actually, I don't think the guy tried. I probably wouldn't have done that. But, I mean, we've had very recent experience with someone that did some rough proficiency. But I personally worked with him. I know he knows the work, and he advanced.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, no, so the problem with this though is it doesn't really, it doesn't show the other side of it either though. I mean, you can't tell how hard did this brother work on it. But with that being said, being a past master, you're right, it's not learning a word perfect that makes a difference. It's learning the morals, the teachings of Freemasonry that really matters. I know a lot of Masons that they struggle with ritual work, but they're fantastic Masons, right?
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, as a past master, I can't imagine someone going up to the master of their lodge and saying, "Hey, I really tried, and I just can't do this." And I can't imagine the master saying, "Oh, if you can't do it word perfect, get out."
Well, but this goes back to a lot of old school mentality. Like I know one of our affiliated past masters has a story about how back in the day, his lodge, when you did your proficiency, the master would have the little lectern in front of him, right? And he'd have 5 matchsticks there. And anytime that the master noticed you made a mistake in your proficiency, he would pick, as you were giving your proficiency, he would pick up a matchstick and snap it while holding in front of his face, right? So that everyone could see the guy in the east just snapped a matchstick very audibly, right? And then he'd put it on the thing. And once the master ran out of matchsticks to snap, they would kick you out of the room and tell you, try again next month. And to me, that is not productive.
Well, that wouldn't shake your confidence at all.
The kindest language I can say for this is, that seems unproductive.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna judge another lodge for how they handle their candidate proficiency.
I will. I think it's garbage.
Thank you, Abby.
I think it's garbage.
Yes.
I respect people who want to take a more noble tact, like Billy here. I realize that he's
Heavy coming out
he's taking
swinging.
the high road. I am not going to take the high road. I
We're
think that
the
it's
low road.
I think it's an awful thing to do to people.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah.
it's an awful waste of human resources.
Yeah.
Because this person could otherwise be a great Mason, and if in the moment we start saying, in my view, that what makes Masonry important or what we value is memorizing stuff, I think that we lose the heart of what Masonry is about, because it's not about memory. The things that we love the most sitting around this table are not the moments we were memorizing and regurgitating information. Those were not the great times. I mean, we might have had great opportunities in getting to know somebody and learning the
Yeah.
catechism. We might have great fellowship opportunities in doing that. But what makes masonry and a magical experience
Is
not
not that.
memorizing stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
And if we can get somebody over that hump in whatever obstacles this gentleman is facing, whether it's a neurodivergence or whether it's just mental blocks, or maybe it's the way the lodge is teaching,
Nerves.
or maybe
Or nerves, yeah.
maybe he isn't putting forth the effort. Let's also concede that possibility.
It's possible that he's not putting in the right amount of effort, right?
well, I mean, so what I was gonna say is I'm not gonna judge another lodge for how they judge their candidate proficiency, but I've been in the room when grandmasters have made mistakes. I've been in the room when committee on work people have made mistakes. Letter perfect is not necessary.
And I think that that's a very interesting choice of words in a catechism that isn't written down.
Yeah.
Because there is
Yeah.
no such thing as perfection, because I guarantee you every member of the Committee on Work is going to have a different opinion about how certain questions are phrased.
Yeah.
And we've heard those conversations. So the idea that letter perfect and word perfect is a thing,
Yeah.
in a world where none of it's written down, you can't have that as your
How
standard.
about the answer to the first question at the door?
Oh, that's a good one. And I obviously, and this is a non-monitorial portion, so we can't disclose what this is.
Right.
But for those of you that know what we're talking about, I mean, Jeremy brought up a good one. There's another good one that gets asked to the senior warden, and that is part of the entered apprentice proficiency, where there's a huge argument about whether or not the answer is 2 distinct phrases or 3 distinct phrases, because it's not written down, and the Committee on Work doesn't govern vocal pauses, which would be the equivalent of commas. So therefore, it could be 2 phrases or 3 phrases, depending on how you interpret it. And there's a big argument about that. So yeah, like I think that's totally fair to say, hey, our ritual,
point, Eddie. Good
you
point.
know, is there a cipher book that exists out there? Yes. Is it official material of the Grand Lodge of Texas? No. It is not a governing document. And anybody that, you know, goes, well, this is what's in the blue cipher book, well, too bad. That's not a governing document. You know, I don't care.
Well, and
Everyone's
let's,
different.
and let's say for a moment that this is from a person who does have a jurisdiction where the cipher book is an official document. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if there is
like
a
they-
jurisdiction that has that.
There
Maybe
are.
there is.
There's a lot of them, actually.
But if you are in that jurisdiction, even if that's the case, it is heartbreaking to me to think that we are losing a potentially great Mason because this person perceives themselves
Well,
as
hey,
not
buddy, you
having the
can't
ability to
memorize this thing out of a booklet, so I don't know how about how good your moral character is.
Well, and that might not even be what's being said. I mean,
Yeah.
I will take Billy's argument here. None of this information, we're getting one side of the information. But the fact that his perception of this situation is the way it is, I think leads to an environment within the lodge that has cultivated that sort of perception, whether that's the case or not. And that is just that's a sad thing for me.
Well, and the only reason I'm going with, you know, we don't really know the other side of the story is being a father. I know sometimes, you know, one of my kids can come up to me and say, oh my God, I tried so hard. And it's like, you've been doing it for 10 minutes.
Yes, good point.
You've made 3 mistakes. That is not enough time to know.
Right.
Yeah, I get
So
it. And I totally see your point on that.
It may be that he's just not applying himself appropriately.
Absolutely.
And therein lies the responsibility of the lodge to tell the guy, hey, listen, you need to try harder. But
Right.
until they tell him that and they leave him in this weird state of despondency, they are failing him.
Well, he needs to talk to the master. of
He
his
needs to
lodge.
talk to the master. He needs to talk to a couple people at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because memorization doesn't make the Mason.
Well, folks, I think we've come up on our time, and that's all for this episode. Before we close out, we'll close with a fraternal quote. This is from David Sarnoff, who was an American businessman and a pioneer of American radio and television. He was the president of the Radio Corporation of America for a long, long time. And the quote is as follows: "Work and live to serve others, to leave the world a little better than you found it, and garner for yourself as much peace of mind as you can. This is happiness." So, If you want to learn more about our lodge or about the podcast, you can find us at fortworthlodge.com or fortworth148.org. Our email address is info148@fortworth148.org. You can learn more about Texas Masonicon at texasmasonicon.com, and more details will be forthcoming on that event in 2022. And yeah, that's about it for this episode. So this is Gabe Yagish signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
Jeremy Gwynn signing off.
Evie Kirkendall signing off.
Sign off.